What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Wednesday, July 12th, 2017. We got a lot of stuff to talk about on this hump day, middle of the weekday, so forth and so on. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And I'm watching this segment on Fox News where apparently Deputy Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders held an off-the-camera interview which somebody got on an audio recorder. And basically hearing the reporters, they're just trying to hack away at her, trying to get her to say anything that they can use. And I love this one comment where they're out there saying, well, the White House is trying to undermine the media. Talk about the pot calling the kettle black on that one. And they're out there saying, you know, is the White House staff just have an epidemic of amnesia? Nobody seems to remember ever talking to these Russian nationals, but we know they did. How do you call this transparency? And boy, it almost feels like somebody has ratcheted up the war on Trump another notch. And there are other indications about that as well. And the media has a right to be feeling a little bit abused. Apparently the latest polls are showing that the American people do trust Donald Trump and the White House more than they trust the corporate media. Neither one of them are all that high, but the corporate media is definitely losing this credibility war against the Trump administration. And it isn't anything that Trump is doing. The corporate media has been destroying its own credibility for years and years and years with lie after lie after lie. The big one we all remember, of course, is Saddam's nuclear weapons. And the corporate media over the years has become very arrogant. We still have that quote from Zika Brzezinski about how their job is to control what the American people are thinking. It's mind control from the corporate media. And I think the arrogance was on display when CNN literally went on out attempting to blackmail the creator of that animated GIF of Trump body checking a person with the CNN logo where their head would be. And it was childish in the extreme. It's backfired on them. They should have just, you know, shrugged it off and let it go, and that would have been the end of it, but they made a big stink about it. And along the way, they've managed to commit multiple felonies under New York law, under Georgia law. And the corporate media seems to feel that this is kind of really okay. Oh, and Mike in the control room just gave me another piece of information. The Reddit user that made that GIF was 15 years old, and CNN went after him. We're going to teach him a lesson to be disrespectful to our logo. And the media still has not learned any lessons. Apparently, MSNBC was interviewing Lindsey Graham, and for some reason, when Graham brought up Hillary Clinton, the audio feed cut out. So they're still out there protecting Hillary, protecting the narcocracy, playing their same old games, and they're in trouble right now. And over at the New York Times, as you know, they've already converted some floors of their building into office rental space, and now we're getting word from the New York Post that dozens of New York Times copy editors are going to be let go, as many as 60. Total number of layoffs coming 110. They're shifting away from the paper edition of the newspaper because nobody's buying it, and they're focusing all their efforts on the online portion of their news. But even that is not doing very well at all. Everybody's still trying to make a big deal about how Trump Jr. met with this Russian lawyer to hear dirt on Hillary Clinton. And let me back up and give you a little context here. First of all, as it turns out, the lawyer didn't really have any dirt on Hillary Clinton. She apparently baited Donald Trump Jr. into the meeting with this promise that they had something on Hillary in order to talk to him about two unrelated issues, adoption law and the rescinding of Magnitsky's law that was harming her client. But now it's getting a little bit weirder. People are starting to ask if this was actually a setup to manufacture a meeting between a Russian and Donald Trump, because this lawyer, Veselnitskaya, she's not checking out. She's listed as a managing partner of Camerton Consulting, which is supposedly based in a Moscow suburb. It doesn't even have a website. And her office in Moscow appears to be a shell only. There's no working phone, there's no email, there's no website. It looks like it's a manufactured front. So something funny is going on there. And we know the Democrats have been intentionally using disinformation from Russia to attack Donald Trump and his campaign ads. And everybody is still talking about that dossier, the dodgy dossier written by former British intelligence agent Christopher Steele, which has been thoroughly debunked. And Mr. Steele was paid by the Democrat-funded opposition research firm Fusion GPS with money from a Hillary Clinton backer. And it fell into the hands of the FBI, and they're not sure how that happened. We're going to be looking at that in a second, but first we're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network. And so there's a question there about John McCain and his involvement with the Trump dossier. Apparently there's a lawsuit filed by Alexei Gubarev in Great Britain, which has brought new details out there confirming pardon me, that Senator McCain was among a small handful of people who had copies of this dodgy dossier before it was circulated to journalists and ultimately published by BuzzFeed. And there was another earlier report that it was McCain who walked this document over to the FBI and said, see, we've got the goods on him, sick him there. Now, as you know, today they're holding confirmation hearings for the FBI Director nominee, Christopher Wray. And Lindsey Graham wasn't even trying to hide the agenda. He was out there basically saying, you know, is Russia our friend or our enemy? Do you think they're an adversary of the United States? Do you think the Russians hacked the DNC and Podesta emails? In other words, Lindsey Graham is sending a message to Christopher Wray. If you want this job, you have to join our agenda of demonizing Russia for things that we can't prove that they actually did. Now, during his opening statements, Wray himself committed to strict independence. What else is he going to say? Yeah, I'm here to sell out to the highest bidder. And everybody's saying, will this finally be an FBI director who will actually go after Hillary Clinton and James Comey? And I don't know. I mean, this is one of the areas in which Donald Trump has turned out to be a tremendous disappointment. Those deep state operatives are still out there walking around, free as a bird. Hillary's already back in politics. She's trying to take control of the Democratic Party for next year's midterm elections. There are rumors that, assuming she can actually walk up a flight of stairs by then, that she's actually going to try and run for president again in 2020. And Donald Trump, unless he wants to be a single-term president, there are two things he needs to do right the heck now. One is overhaul the election system so that it is far more difficult to cheat it. And two, he's got to go after Hillary for the crimes we all know she committed. James Comey in that press conference said, yes, she committed these felony violations of Title 18, but we're not going to charge her because she didn't mean to do wrong. But Title 18 does not require intent. If you accidentally reveal classified information, you can go to jail for a very long time. Now, being investigated and they say we're not going to charge you means double jeopardy doesn't apply. Hillary Clinton can still be charged for all of these crimes, and she ought to be. The American people have lost almost all trust and faith and confidence in that federal government. And unless they start seeing some of these known high-level criminals get arrested and handcuffed and hauled off to jail, there's going to be no confidence left whatsoever. And when a government has totally lost the confidence of its population, that becomes a government that cannot function anymore. Now, speaking of the Clintons, there's a story that came on out of Daily Caller where apparently the Clinton Foundation got $100 million from a blood minerals firm. Now, blood minerals is an expansion on the idea of blood diamonds. meaning that along with diamonds, there are other areas where minerals are being mined in war zones to help finance political insurgencies or despotic warlords. And apparently, one of the companies engaged in that, this Swedish-Canadian oil and mining conglomerate, gave the Clinton Foundation $100 million. And I don't think they did it just out of the kindness of their hearts. Now, the good news is we always get these phone calls saying, oh, nobody around here seems to care. Nobody cares what's going on here, which I suspect is part of the propaganda here. But apparently, a survey is now showing that nearly half of Americans have taken part in First Amendment activities in 2017. That means almost 50% of Americans have at some point so far this year gone on out and marched in a demonstration or a protest or in some other way used their right to freedom of speech to express their discontent with what's going on. Now, obviously, the corporate media isn't going to cover it. They're trying to sell you the idea that everybody's just happy with things the way they are, and there's no reason for anybody to be upset. And, everything's fine. Unemployment is low. Vaccines are safe. GMOs are good for you. The people of the United States are happy, and wars are good for business. And I promise I'll respect you in the morning. Little bit of good news. Could be better, but it's still good. Steve Scalise is now out of the intensive care unit. Apparently, they got that infection under control. He's still considered to be in serious condition. And it is taking him a long time to recover from this attempted assassination. Now, interestingly enough, as you know, Chelsea Clinton is becoming a public figure. She's obviously angling for a run into Congress and eventually a run at the White House. And like her parents, she's coming on out with books. And apparently she's already in hot water over the book that she created and Penguin Random House published called She Persisted. It's a children's book, liberal ideology. But apparently another author, Christopher Kimberly, has filed a federal lawsuit saying Chelsea Clinton and Penguin Random House stole the idea for the book from him. So that will be interesting to see there as well. All right, let's get into the war zone information here because there's a lot of stuff going on over there. Right now in Syria, the army is trying to divide the militant-held areas in eastern Damascus. They want to basically drive through, separate them, and then they can just take their time dealing first with one and then the other. Divide and conquer. That's the actual origin of that phrase. It's a military tactic. And they're making great strides. They're doing very, very well here. Now, interestingly enough, somebody over at Activist Post was looking at a map at all these new U.S. bases in Syria, which, by the way, are all there without the permission of the Syrian government, and notice they form a clear pattern. And so they came out with this article about these U.S. bases in Syria are placed to prevent the Syrian military from advancing into the future Kurdistan. So this carving up of Syria and Turkey and Iraq to form a new Kurdistan is apparently still an agenda for the United States. Break all the countries up into little tiny pieces that are easy to bully around, exploit, loot, plunder, and bully. Another video has surfaced showing the U.S.-backed Syrian Kurds torturing their prisoners. And apparently the YPG forces were kicking and stomping on their prisoners, demanding information about the location of ISIS fighters. The detainees are screaming they don't know anything about it. But apparently Kurdish officials confirmed the authenticity of the videos. So these are the kind of people the U.S. government likes to hire to do their dirty work. Meanwhile, following the confirmation of al-Baghdadi's death, we're starting to see the different factions in all these rebels start to fight amongst themselves. And apparently there are conflicts and clashes among these ISIL members and commanders after the confirmation of the death of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. Meanwhile, in Hajwa, an ISIS leader there has declared himself the new emir following Baghdadi's death. And Jabbar al-Mamuri, a leader of the popular mobilization forces. And he is now claiming al-Baghdadi's role, and we'll see how long that lasts. But good that they're fighting each other and killing each other off. It's going to be good for the Syrian people. Now, we reported on this earlier, but it is worth mentioning again. The U.S. government has declared that even after ISIS is defeated in Iraq, the U.S. forces will stay where they are to garrison the country, to make sure the people in the government aren't thinking those double plus ungood thoughts about actually running their own country for themselves. Sets a bad example for everybody else. And I expect that if the Syria situation is resolved with U.S. forces still on the ground there, they'll make the same declaration. Yes, we are the exceptional, indispensable country, and we have decided we're going to have our people on your ground, and there really isn't much that you can do about it. Which sounds like famous last words. In fact, I remember hearing something similar to that back during Vietnam here. Now, the Syrian army up in Damascus seized a convoy of 4 vehicles that were carrying a large volume of arms and ammunition to terrorist-held regions that are currently under the siege of army troops. These 4 trucks were trying to break the siege, and they found machine guns, munitions, thousands of rounds of bullets, mortar shells, and this is the interesting part, French-made missiles. Everybody's running guns all over the place there, still trying to keep things cranked up and violent. The U.S. dares not let the violence stop, because as soon as it does, Syria will say, the war's over, you can all go home now. And I'm sure the U.S. will claim victory over ISIS and al-Qaeda, but in the greatest strategic plan of their agenda for the Middle East, it is a defeat. And it will be the biggest military defeat for the United States government since Vietnam. Now, down in Qatar, Turkey has proven to actually be a very good supportive friend. They have sent almost 200 cargo planes full of life necessities to Qatar since this dispute began. Let's see, 197 cargo planes, 16 trucks, and 1 ship carrying the daily needs for the people of Qatar. And basically what Erdogan is doing is his own sort of recreation of the Berlin airlift. And that went on for a very, very long time until the Soviet Union capitulated and reopened the road to West Berlin. And remember, there's a big stink growing because Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, tried to get a $500 million loan from a very wealthy Qatari billionaire and was refused because of his recent failures in business, and he needed the money to prop up part of his real estate empire. And it was at that point Kushner went to Trump and said, we've got to take a hard line with Qatar. We've got to just hold them. And that right there does stink to high heavens of corrupting influence. I think Jared Kushner needs to be ejected from that White House. I think Trump made a big mistake just saying, yeah, I'm going to have family in here. It's going to be a family affair. The Bushes did it. I can do it too. Meanwhile, the Yemen cholera outbreak has passed 300,000. The outbreak is spiraling, according to the ICRC, more than 1,700 deaths. And what is really interesting is there was an attempt or a promise by a Saudi prince that they were going to be donating money to get a cholera vaccine into Yemen, but it doesn't look like it's actually going to get there. And this actually came from Prince Salman himself. He donated $66 million to the UN agencies. He would have been better off donating it to the Red Crescent or Doctors Without Borders, who have the skill and experience to actually get on the ground and deal with cholera outbreaks. But apparently that $66 million just sort of disappeared into administrative fees and processing costs or whatever else is going on there. But I got to tell you, it doesn't feel like this is a natural outbreak. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to take a phone call here. David in South Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Das Vidanya, Davarish.
You just got
Russian
here.
for how are you, comrade?
Oh, I thought Das Vidanya is what you said when you were going away.
Well, coming or going.
Okay.
Either way, you've called somebody Davadish in Russia right now. They'd probably get kind of angry at you because it means comrade. But I just tried to pull up a potential political map of the future of the Middle East that I saw in the past. And as I was typing that in, my system crashed. I was going to send that to you, and I hope to in the future. But I was just curious in your opinion about this because you're so well knowledgeable about all this. Do you feel like Trump is being set up as Tsar Nicholas, and the thing about it being is we've got potential world war all over the world with the Russians, the Chinese, North Koreans, Iran, and if a war happens between all these countries, we're probably going to lose it because we do not have the capacity to win in all these theaters at one time.
That's
or
why
even
it's going to go
maybe
nuclear.
One or two of them. Well, hopefully not, but at the same time, some kind of conflict that we get into, Syria probably, North Korea maybe, that we wind up losing badly in, and everybody knows it, and the media is going to turn on Trump in the way that basically Tsar Nicholas was looking at a situation where the war went terribly for him. The civil population was really against everything. The army rebelled on him. Everything fell apart at home. And all of a sudden, this big eruption happened. You see Antifa out there really boldly going after everything. The media, except for semi-Fox now, they're really going after everything that's going on with the anybody who's patriotic in this country. And I hate to say it, but there's a lot of people turning towards alternative media. But generally speaking, half the population really does just sit there and watch NBC News or something like that every night. And their local news might be a Fox affiliate or something like that, but they're getting the corporate feed still. And they are not, Fox News nationally. So they're seeing, the same feed they're getting from their corporate masters locally.
Yeah,
so,
but at the same time, you have to look at the actual ratings of these corporate media outlets. They're down in the basement, which means they're out there. They're still broadcasting. They're forcing people at airports and post offices to look at the CNN feed, but people aren't watching. Because they know they're being lied to. It's like the last days of the Soviet Union, when everybody knew that Pravda and Izvestia were just nothing but, spokespeople for the government. In fact, there used to be a joke that there's no Pravda in Izvestia and no Izvestia in Pravda. And so and that was part of the deterioration of the society. And we're in the same place as well. I mean, you heard those stories earlier where the New York Times is getting ready to let more people go. The ad revenues are down in the corporate media. And now we're prior to Trump's winning the election, because they know they're not going to get it now, but while Obama was still in office, the corporate media was asking for government bailouts. That's how much trouble they're in right now.
That's absolutely true. On the local market, I don't watch the corporate feed. Someone in the other room that I'm married to does. And so the local news is on as I pass through the room. And the local news is always, biased. And, the average person is, not really, half the people, I would say, or maybe a third. That's all it takes, is just tuning into a local broadcast of what they're being fed by, their local corporate guy. Mm-hmm. And so they're seeing, one side of it and not the full story. They're not getting the in-depth information that we get off of RBN or, any other.
Well, that's why it's so important for everybody listening to the show and reading the website to share that information and just go to these people who are still enslaved to that little matrix TV screen and say, you are being lied to yet again. These are the same people who told you Saddam had nuclear weapons. These are the same people who told you that there was going to be no more snow and ice. And just, go to the areas where everybody understands the media lied to them and start on that foundation and say, they're still doing it today. Anyway, David, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha America, welcome back to the show here, and I want to skip back to the political stuff because there were two stories that somehow I missed in my talking points. The first one is that Representative Brad Sherman of California, Democrat, no surprise, has formally introduced an article of impeachment against President Trump. And the article of impeachment is obstruction of justice, and the specific claim is that by firing James Comey, Trump was hoping to interfere with the Russian investigation. Now, this is never going to fly. This is just another attempt to be able to smear Donald Trump. Oh, there's articles of impeachment against him. Ooh, he's a bad president. So don't feel bad for him when something horrible happens to him. And the other story is Senator Grassley has now come on out and confirmed that, yes, the memos leaked by James Comey to this professor, who then in turn leaked them to the media, did contain classified information. And Comey cannot avail himself of the Hillary defense that he didn't mean to do wrong. Yes, he did. He knew it was wrong to be leaking classified information to people who don't have the security clearances to handle it. So, book him, Dano. What can I tell you? All righty, getting on back to the war zone information here. Apparently, the United States has approved a $3.9 billion Patriot missile system for Romania. Just trying to wall in Russia with all these missile defense systems, and Putin is coming on out and saying we're going to be forced to respond. There are going to be reprisals. Russia's not the aggressor. The U.S. is the aggressor, and what the U.S. is trying to do with all these missiles all across Europe and all across Asia and up into South Korea is to build a picket line to discourage Russia from responding to a first strike nuclear attack. Remember, Paul Craig Watson actually came on out and said, his sources in Washington, D.C., said there was serious consideration being given to the idea of avoiding a conventional war with Russia entirely and just hauling on off and nuking them and leaving them so afraid that they wouldn't dare a retaliatory strike. And I wouldn't want to bet the planet on that. But that's what all these patriots and THAADs are all about, is trying to hem in Russia so they can't fight back when the U.S. attacks them. These people are really insane. Are they all on prescription antidepressants there in Washington, D.C.? Is there lead in the tap water in Washington, D.C. like there is pretty much everywhere else in the country? Because these people are not acting like they are sane. Now, article that came out of Alternet, Trump is on course to get a hot war going with North Korea. An underinformed president faces an overhyped threat. What could go wrong? And basically what they're saying here is that they're trying to make a big deal out of the fact that North Korea is test firing their missiles. They land in the Sea of Japan, and there's no difference between that and when the United States test fires missiles from Vandenberg or from right here in Hawaii over at the Pacific Missile Test Range and drops them in the Pacific. It's exactly the same thing. And they're trying to make a big deal out of it. Now, as you know, China, and for that matter, pretty much everybody else in the world, they've really had it with all these U.S. wars. They don't want to be part of a coalition. And China has basically come on out and said, you can't blame us for what North Korea is doing. They don't listen to us either. And now the U.S. is back to saying, we're going to go it alone against North Korea because we have to. And Nikki Haley's already up at the United Nations saying, yes, we will act on our own to curb the North Korean threat. North Korea is not a threat. North Korea does not threaten world peace. The United States does. The U.S. government is trying to scare all of you with stories about long-range missiles and nuclear weapons, and you need to keep your eye on a simple fact. The only country that has ever actually used nuclear weapons against the civilians of another country is the United States. All nuclear weapons produced since then, and their delivery systems, are built on the idea of deterring an attack, of making the cost of invading our nation so great it simply isn't worth it. And that's why these other nations want these missiles. And Iran could have a nuclear weapon. They're not going to use it unless they're pushed into a corner. Saddam could have had a nuclear weapon. He wasn't going to just haul off and use it. They're very expensive. You spend a lot of money building that deterrent. You're not just going to throw it away on a whim. These countries that want nuclear weapons want to deter the United States from messing about with their country, as the United States has been messing about with other people's countries for decades. And that makes a lot of sense here. Now, even as it screams about the test of North Korea's mid-range missile, the U.S. has another drill. They air-launched an ICBM from a C-17 that took off from right here in Hawaii and fired it northward over Alaska, and it was intercepted by a THAAD, we are told. A lot of video about the launching, the deployment, and everything. I didn't even know that we had an air-launchable ICBM, but apparently we do. But we know a lot of U.S. military testing, especially for political gain, they're rigged. Homing beacons, whatever it takes. So they had their little test here. Now, again, everybody who's paying attention knows who the aggressor is. Everybody understands they're going to have to be ready to defend their nation against aggression eventually. Remember that neocon agenda is the U.S. will rule the world. The U.S. government is gunning for everybody. No country on earth is beneath the notice of the neocons. They want it all. And other countries who are looking at this are getting ready to take a stand, to make it as costly as possible for the U.S. to mess with their country. Over in China, they just launched their first type 055 guided missile destroyer. And apparently it is a major technological step forward for China's Navy. And the type 055 is at least equivalent to the capabilities of the Arleigh Burke class and the Japanese Atago class, and in fact any other DDG in service in the world today, and it might actually exceed it. Nobody really knows what its capabilities are yet. I'm sure they'll be taking a good look at it at the next RIM pack. A lot of intelligence gathering goes on at these large exercises. Now, over in the world of U.S. military spending, the F-35 program costs have jumped to $406.5 billion in the latest estimate. And by the way, that's not the total cost. That's just the production cost for the current run of these aircraft. And before that, there's $1 trillion in testing and development. And they started producing this plane, and it still has all these problems. Do you know if a car manufacturer starts producing a car with known design defects and puts it out in the marketplace, they get sued out of existence, especially if somebody gets killed. Or at the very least, they have to do a recall. Not in the military. You can put out a piece of junk, and the money just pours on in. And it really is not a very effective weapon at all. I think we mentioned yesterday a pilot was trying, as a test, a VTOL landing on a carrier in F-35 in the dark, simulating nighttime, wartime conditions, and the electronic display that was supposed to get him safely onto the deck malfunctioned. And he made it onto the deck, and even his commanding officer was saying, we were just lucky. Now, we've been talking about the paradigm of naval conflict and the institutional inertia of high command. And the model I like to use is going into World War II, the generally accepted wisdom was that the big, heavy battleships, like the Aiea class, those were going to be the mainstay of naval combat. They were going to carry the brunt of the naval warfare. And aircraft carriers were kind of nice to have, but they're just over on the side. They'll never be that important. And then, of course, Pearl Harbor woke everybody up about that one. We're looking at the same thing going into World War III, where the conventional wisdom is that the supercarriers are the mainstay of naval combat. And it may be just as blinkered, if you will, as the similar faith in the heavy battleships going into World War II. And I'm not the only one who's thinking that. article out of Russia Today where apparently a security think tank is looking at HMS Queen Elizabeth, Britain's new aircraft carrier, which costs £3 billion, and they're saying it could easily be sunk by a volley of missiles that cost a tiny fraction of that. And remember, warfare is about economics. You want to be able to conduct your war less expensively against the enemy than they do against yours, because the first side that runs out of money loses. That's really what it comes on down to. And so this report from the Royal United Services Institute, security think tank, came on out and said this £3 billion aircraft carrier could be disabled and sunk with missiles that cost less than £3 million. And yeah, they're absolutely right, because Russia and China and other countries have been thinking outside the box. They recognize the U.S. dependence on the supercarrier, and they've been designing weapons specifically engineered, artificially intelligent, maneuverable, ultra-fast, specifically to go after those carriers. Now, down in Israel, there's been kind of a weird development. They've just passed a new bill from the far-right coalition ordering the courts to give priority to Jewishness over democracy, which sounds kind of like a weird situation. But the idea is basically Israel is trying to redefine itself as an ethnically or religiously based state, a theocracy. And said the bill basically saying that if courts are confronted with a question of something being democratic versus serving Jewishness, they have to give the priority to the Jewishness. So yeah, they're becoming ever more apartheid. Day after day after day after day after day. All right. Let's talk about the economic news for a bit. It's an interesting article over at Zero Hedge on borrowed time, and it starts out with a cautionary reminder from history, saying that there are a number of things you do not want to hear a central banker say. And one of those things just popped out of Janet Yellen's mouth. Quote, "I don't believe we will see another financial crisis in our lifetime," end quote. She actually said that. And that has to be right up there with Irving Fisher's observation from the 17th of October, 1929, that stock prices have reached what looks like a permanently high plateau. Or John Maynard Keynes' forecast from 1927, we will not have any more crashes in our time. In other words, it's famous last words. And interestingly enough, many years ago when I was still working in film, I had a small bit role on a production of The Day the Bubble Burst, based on the book of the same name, which was written by somebody who'd actually been on the trading floor during the crash of 29, and he was serving as technical assistant to the show. And that was in the script, where Irving Fisher comes on out and says it's reached what looks like a permanently high plateau. And it tells you consistently the money junkies, they're going on belief and hopes and wishful thinking, and they're not really looking at what's going on. They don't want to see the problems as they show up. They just want to go on believing the money will flow to their pockets from everybody else because that's the way the universe is supposed to work. Story coming out of Zero Hedge again. Investors are dumping emerging market debt at a record pace. That is a red warning flag. Now, to the world of the money junkies, debt is considered an item of value as long as you can actually collect it, along with the interest. But obviously, if you can't collect that debt, it becomes a liability. And as the global economy starts to stutter, investors are starting to pull out. They're not eager to buy that debt anymore. They're trying to get on out from underneath it. Now, as you know, a while back, we had a bunch of callers into the show about how great Bitcoin was, and you should be supporting it, and you should be blah, 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 blah. And I said, I'm not sure. It doesn't feel like it's a real currency. It doesn't have a commodity base, and it can be manipulated. So over at Investment Watch blog, we have this story where apparently Ethereum is now down 52%, Ripple is down 57%, Aeon is down 70% in the last 8 days. That is actually a collapse. When something plunges 50% in a short time, that is defined as a collapse to the finance industry. I think somebody did a pump and dump. And we know there's a lot of fraud on Wall Street. They openly admit to it. They openly admit to it. It's a very crooked business. People often do not see the fraudsters for what they are because they dress in expensive suits and they drive very expensive cars and they wear $100,000 wristwatches on their wrist, and everybody says, ooh, I would like to be like that. And they don't think about just how they got to be like that in the first place. We do business the old-fashioned way. We cheat the heck out of our own customers, like Bernie Madoff did. Now, apparently, Russia is now looking at a plan to create a joint investment forum with the Bank of China. This is yet another system being set up to bypass the U.S. dollar, to attack its global hegemonic domination. And it is working. The dollar is not as solidly in charge of the world's economy as it used to be, and that is why our government is so eager for war, especially with Russia and China. Got to blockade them out, got to get them out of our game, because our private central bank is meant to rule the world. All right, we're coming up here on another commercial break here. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we'll be back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And I'm going to step back to politics one more time because this story just came on in from the Western Journalism Center. One of the big supporters to the DNC last year and to Hillary was the founder of Zynga, Mark Pincus. And he wrote some very fat paychecks, and the DNC was expecting to continue his largesse, and he just notified them that in point of fact, he is not funding the DNC any longer. He's putting his money into a new organization called Win the Future, because he sees the current Democratic Party as still in disarray, still unwilling to learn the lessons of 2016, and especially with this idea that Hillary Clinton is going to try and seize control of the DNC for next year's midterms. And so Pincus is forming this new organization, which could almost be the beginning of a third political party, carved out of the disenfranchised members of the Democrats. And I think the very first thing you ought to do is start talking to Bernie Sanders about coming on over. All right, getting on back to the economic news here. Connecticut capital Hartford has been downgraded to junk status by Standard & Poor. And this basically, last week, Illinois passed a 3-year overdue budget in hopes of avoiding a downgrade to junk status. But apparently Moody's is now saying it may still downgrade Illinois to junk status even though they have a budget deal. In fact, it could happen pretty much at any moment. Everybody is running out of money. It's all being sucked up by Wall Street, Israel, and the war machine. And I'm still getting all these emails about how raising the minimum wage would be terrible. No, it's not going to be terrible. Because right now our economy is broken. It has been made impossible, almost impossible, for ordinary working and middle-class people to trade their labor and skill for decent wages and salaries that they can then pump back into the economy to keep it going. If you don't find some way to start getting money to the middle and working classes, it is going to collapse. It already is. Look at the retail Mageddon that's going on. And I find it utterly amazing that supposedly the finest minds on Wall Street and the finest economic advisors in the government really don't seem to understand that. Or maybe, as I suggested the other day, they know it's going to collapse anyway. There's nothing they can do to stop it. So they're just going to grab what they can grab for themselves before the party ends. Meanwhile, we're finding out Gymboree is closing 350 stores after they filed for bankruptcy. And according to this story out of Government Slaves, Analysts are now saying one of the reasons the car makers are in trouble. Remember the other day I told you we have this old abandoned drive-in movie theater at the bottom of the hill. The screens are gone. It's used for flea markets and various other things. Now it's being used as an overflow lot for the local car dealerships. They've got row on row of all these brand new cars just sitting there. It turns out, analysts are saying, right now the average U.S. household cannot afford a new car. We're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And I want to back up and recover that story that we were talking about going into the break, because I don't know if you actually heard the end of it. Basically, analysts are now looking at the economy and saying one of the reasons that Carmageddon is underway is the average U.S. household can't afford a new car. And again, we're seeing this willing blindness of an economic system that feels that they can raise prices and lower wages and salaries and still somehow continue to do business. It doesn't work that way. Before the people can buy your products, the people must be allowed to earn the money with which to buy the products, and no, nobody wants to take out any more loans. Nobody has any confidence the economy is going to get any better. That's why people aren't taking out car loans. And again, look at those car commercials where they're out there talking about, 0% APR for like the first few years of your car loan. Nobody wants a car loan. Nobody wants to borrow any money because they don't have the confidence they're going to be able to pay it all back. And this is what happens after years and years of high-paying jobs disappearing and people being forced to take lower-paying jobs while still carrying their existing debt load. I think the economic planners are looking at their little numbers and their ledgers, and they're dreaming of wealth beyond Midas, and they really did not factor in the psychology of the population and how it would react to the economic changes, because they're making some really, really bad mistakes, in my opinion. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Don in Louisiana, I think. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, it's Iowa. Don in Iowa.
Okay, and the font on this screen is the L and the I look exactly the same here. Okay.
You got you're using homemade computers over there, right? Pretty much.
Well, actually, this is running on an old XP laptop, the Skype link, which is also my text communication here.
Well, I admire you for being able to do all that kind of stuff. I couldn't do anything. Anyway, here's my question. This whole deal with Russia, Lindsey, what's the guy's name? Lindsey what?
Graham.
Lindsey Graham. Yeah, he's like a cartoon character, reminds me.
Most of them are.
But, I mean, he's asking this, what is that guy supposed to say? Are they an enemy or a friend? Well, I mean, we're not at war. The guy could have said, listen, I mean, he should have come right back at him. We're not at war with, of course he can't. He has to just shut up and try to and wait till the whole thing's over with.
Lindsey Graham didn't expect an answer. Lindsey Graham was sending a message. You are either on board the Get Russia bandwagon or you will not be confirmed. What Ray should have actually come on back and said is, I'm going to be in charge of an investigative bureau. Foreign policy is set by the Department of State. So that is a question that is more suited to whoever's going to be Secretary of State, except we already have one, of course. But Lindsey Graham was telegraphing a message. He is saying that from now on, any of Trump's appointees, if they're not on the Get Russia bandwagon, they will not be confirmed.
Well, he's trying to say that, but Lindsey Graham himself actually has no power at all. I mean, he tried to run for president, and he couldn't even get 1%. Nobody really likes the guy.
Well, he's got no power with the voters, but he's very in tight with Israel and AIPAC, and that gives him a lot of punch behind the scenes.
They're not going. I don't think they're going to reject this FBI guy.
Well, we'll see what happens, but it almost feels like this, dump Trump and start war with Russia agenda has been cranked up another notch. They just grab that little lever, put the thumb button in, and boom, up another notch. It just feels like that. You can almost feel the panic and desperation in some of these people.
Okay, but as far as Russia, I must have missed something. I know I have not followed foreign policy really close the last 20 years, but at one time, everybody was overjoyed. Russia, Russia's turned into capitalism, and then Russia is on ours. At one time, we were sending people over there to help them navigate into the capitalistic world and this and that. What happened? I mean, where exactly did all this change? I don't understand that.
It changed about the time that Vladimir Putin took direct control over Russia's private central bank. Now, Russia's bank is still privately owned, but it is being run by the government in order to manage Russia's public currency as a public utility, and that is something the private central bankers absolutely cannot stand. And as the U.S. dollar loses trustworthiness in the eyes of the rest of the world, more and more people are getting leery of that whole Bretton Woods deal, and they want to start doing commerce with other nations without having to go through the U.S. dollar. And that's why Bretton Woods is falling apart, and more people are taking to international trade with the ruble and the yuan, which are very stable, trustworthy currencies, and more Russia and China are buying gold to partially back their currencies with a known commodity. And so from the U.S. Economic point of view, Russia's ruble and China's yuan are a threat to the continued global hegemonic domination of the U.S. dollar. And the reason that is so critical is because following Bretton Woods and this automatic flow of money coming into the American empire from every other country in the world that was doing business across an international border, our system got lazy. They let our manufacturing go away to other countries because they just didn't want to get their hands dirty. And now American domestic manufacturing is in serious decline, has been for 30 years. Both in quality and quantity, American-made products are now being viewed around the world as overpriced junk, not worth having. And then when you throw on top of it that disastrous experiment with GMO agriculture that nobody wants to buy, I mean, both Russia and China ban GMO inside their countries, then right now the entire U.S. economy is being propped up by the interest being generated from forcing other countries to borrow U.S. dollars to trade across borders, and most importantly, to buy oil with. And that was the main reason for the invasion of Iraq, and for Libya was the decision by Saddam and Gaddafi to stop selling their oil for the U.S. dollar and to sell it for, in Iraq's case, the euro, and in Libya's case, the gold dinar. That's really what's behind all of these wars and bloodshed, is dragging the world back to Bretton Woods, where everybody's economy is subordinate to the U.S. economy.
Yeah, but it'll never work. In the long run, it's not going to work.
I don't think it's going to work either, but unfortunately...
In the long run, it won't work. It's a delaying tactic, maybe, but you're right that people can't afford to buy cars in America anymore. If there's any time they would want to buy cars, it would be right now. They're cheap.
Oh, looking at those commercials. If
gas is cheap also. I mean, once you get a car, you can... gas is pretty cheap.
No, if anybody had any money, now is definitely the time to buy a car. But again, people don't have a lot of money. A lot of people are struggling just to pay their rent. And again, nobody wants to take out any more loans. People are working really, really hard to pay down their existing debt, and because they can see what's coming. They have no reason to think that they're going to be able to sustain the loan payments on a car loan into the future, because the economy is clearly heading downhill. Companies are closing. People are losing their jobs. We all know we're being lied to about the unemployment numbers. The entire general population of the United States right now is very dispirited, and they're very pessimistic about the future. And nobody's going to sign a loan agreement when they're not convinced they'll be able to actually make those payments, because we all have to protect that precious little credit rating.
People are just trying to survive, and there's this new thing, ride sharing in big cities. People, instead of driving your own car to work, they have some kind of they have a lot of carpools going on.
There's nothing new with that. I mean, back when I worked at JPL, I took part in a carpool there because I lived quite a distance away from the lab. Back then, it was more about saving the environment than it was the economic necessities. So anyway,
they say that's increasing a lot, though, that people are doing that.
It is, but again, you need to be very careful because criminals are taking advantage of that. They'll run a Craig's ad for let's start a carpool, and then people show up and they get robbed. And so you have to be careful about that. And again, where are the police when you really need them? We're going to do a quick shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. But yeah, if anybody actually had any money, the prices on cars are really good. The prices on appliances are really good. But nobody has any money, and nobody wants to borrow any money because
these employment numbers they try to throw at you it's deceptive. Yeah, there are jobs, but
hello. I think we just lost. I think we just lost Don. Yeah, I mean the reality is the government wants to talk about there's jobs out there. What's missing are the high-paying jobs with which the middle class built this nation. And that's the reason people don't want to take out more loans or mortgages, because they've been through the experience of having a high-paying job, and they take on a certain debt load that they can manage and support, and then all of a sudden their high-paying job is gone, and they're forced to take a lower-paying job, and now they are in trouble, and they're having to refi and re-extend the loans, and they're just getting in deeper and deeper. And I feel sorry for these people. And my message to them is, don't beat yourself up because you did not do anything wrong. It's being done to you. And it's being done to you deliberately by the money junkies. All right, let's go back to the phones here. Justin on Earth, what's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Thanks for taking my call. I wanted to weigh in on the minimum wage situation. Can I give you a couple of figures just to kind of let you know what I'm going to be talking about?
Yeah.
An example being Japan, for example. The ratio of pay for the CEO to the average worker is 11 to 1.
Yes.
Canada, it's 20 to 1.
Mm-hmm.
Mexico, 47 to 1.
Mm-hmm.
And United States, 475 to 1.
Yes.
What if they were, instead of setting up a minimum wage, if they were to establish a maximum wage so that the CEO can only make a certain, maybe something that's reasonable, maybe 50 to 1 for the average worker?
Well, then those corporate executives would stop writing very fat campaign checks every election season.
Well, there is always that, isn't there?
I'm afraid that's it. That's in a nutshell. That's the problem. When we lost those laws limiting the amount of money that people could donate to politicians, and especially when they passed that idea that corporations are persons and allowed to make donations under the First Amendment, it basically turned Capitol Hill from a legislative body for the people of the United States into a giant shopping mall, a one-stop serves all for all the corrupting influences in our country to just show on up and just buy their Congress critters and get what they want.
And we do have the best politicians that money can buy, of course.
True. It's a shame that we don't have the money.
Right, exactly. Well, that was just an idea that I had, and I also thought, along with that, if something like that were to occur, maybe if they put a rider on that if the company has to lay off, for example, 1% of their workforce, then the CEO and the upper management also take a 1% pay cut.
Well, that's a good way to go here, but one of the things that's really stunning is we hear all these companies are going out of business, they're in bankruptcy, and yet somehow those top executives walk out with these golden parachute deals worth millions and millions of dollars. The system is very much skewed to keep the already rich rich. And it's amazing. The money junkies are so hooked up to their addiction. They're out there saying, we can't give the workers any more money. It'll be a disaster. Well, not giving the workers more money is turning out to be a disaster Because, yeah, at the moment, these CEOs and their pet politicians may be making a little bit more money, but in the long run, it's already starting to collapse.
I agree. It's very counterproductive. It's a self-defeating attitude, I guess, is one way to say it.
In the long run.
I'm a long-time listener, Michael.
Yes.
I'm a long-time listener. In fact, you brought me to RBN the first time you came to RBN, so I have to say thank you for that.
Okay.
It's the first time I've called you.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm glad you're listening to me and to our other hosts as well. So we're going to let you go here and switch over to Mike in Alaska. Aloha, Mike. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. For that last caller, I would also throw in there that one thing we have to think about is I was recently reading the biography of Benjamin Franklin, and in there it mentioned that around the time of the founding of 1776 era, 2/3 of America owned their own businesses.
Yes.
Most people own their own business. Now, it wouldn't be a corporation size. It wouldn't be 500 people. It might be a family-run business.
They'd own a store. They'd own a blacksmith shop. They'd own the family farm. And, it was a very distributed and robust economy running on the colonial scrip. And it worked really well, of course, until King George III started, first of all, the Currency Act, and then laws that were passed that said that certain classes of products couldn't be produced locally anymore. They had to be imported from British companies.
And, not everything can be done that way as far as having a small ownership. There wouldn't be an Alaska Mike's car company with just me. Obviously, there is a place for corporations. But we have to wonder why, we're thinking of things in the W-2 mind frame, mindset. We need to be thinking, how can you be an owner? How can you pay yourself more versus I just want to put a cap on what the CEO here makes, or I want to raise on what I make. I want you to own the business, and I want to buy your product. And then if there's more businesses like that, there's less control at the top. Because if it was a bunch of small businesses making little handcrafted products or whatever it is, then the big donation, you would just keep that money and live a good life versus the CEOs at the top, the billionaires that go out and buy the New York Times, and then we have to get trolled with all their, terrible content. There's just too much money concentrated at the top.
Yes.
And more owners at the bottom would really help that situation, I think.
I mean, wealth inequality on this scale has brought down countries, nations throughout history. And just that disparity, as Justin was saying, 400, the ratio of CEO pay to worker pay in this country is 450 to 1. That is absolutely obscene. Again, if you're expecting the American people to come into your car dealership or your shopping mall and buy stuff, then you have to set it up so that they will be able to earn the money, to trade their labor and their skills for enough money to buy those products you want to sell them. And that will keep the economy running in the long term. Right now, it seems like everybody is thinking short term. The next quarter, the next stockholders meeting, because Donald Trump is wrapped up in that swamp issue, he's not performing one of his key functions, which he should be doing as president, which is to maintain the long view, the wide view of what is best for the nation as a whole.
Mike, I agree, and I wanted to provide a different thought on North Korea and China and what's going on over there.
Okay.
And I would preface it by saying if I'm wrong, I won't vote for him if he runs again. But what I think he's actually doing is he's not, I'm hoping, let's put it this way, he's not intending to invade. But what he is kind of doing is I think he's actually making China lose a little bit of face because he's kind of puffed that leader up and said, okay, this is just a dog running around in your yard, poo-pooing everywhere, and you guys are big and tough and can handle this. And he's doing that to keep the peace, to say, this is, we acknowledge we're going everywhere, pushing everyone around. This is not even our backyard. This is your sphere of influence, but everyone agrees this is a crazy dog. And then everyone goes, yeah, and you're making good points. They're not really a threat, but they are crazy. The guy's crazy.
Well, we're being shown a portrait of him that is crazy. And again, unless you actually go to North Korea, all you think you know about North Korea and Kim Jong-un is being given to you by the same people who told you Saddam had nuclear weapons. All right, so Mike, stay on the line. I'm going to come back to you after this commercial break. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to Mike in Alaska. We're talking about China and Korea. First of all, you need to understand China has already pulled out of this whole nonsense. They're saying it's not our responsibility. You know, we don't have a problem with North Korea, and we refuse to be made responsible for their actions. And so if that was Trump's real agenda, it seems to have fallen flat on its face. But I really don't think that was the agenda. I think Trump has been successfully corralled, cornered, whatever you want to call it, and he is now going along with the agenda of the deep state. And when you get to be my age, you start to recognize a pattern. Every single election, you'll have candidates who are out there saying, we need to stop this insanity, we need to stop the rush to war, and they'll get elected, and then all of a sudden, we're still getting what we were getting before. The core agenda of the United States never changes. War, greed, and empire.
Mike, that I could be totally wrong. That could be what's happening. I hope it's not. North Korea, think about it like this. What if we went in? What if we were talking right now and we had won? We're in there and we've got troops. I mean, what would you end up doing? Where would it end up going? Would it be annexed to South Korea? Would China set up a buffer zone? It's just such a pitfall. Even if you win the military side of things, it turns into an Iraq times 10. I think that Trump knows that. I think that even though he likes to puff up the macho kind of alpha male stuff, he knows that it would be worse than what we've already done in the last 20 years or so. And so my theory is that he'll actually go to the Asian countries surrounding China and North Korea, and what he'll do is, after he kind of puffs up China and says, take care of it, they've politely said, exactly what you just said, not really an issue for us, not our concern, we're not interested in this. But then he goes to the neighbors and say, well, there's a dog running all around. It usually hangs out in China's backyard. They've said they're not going to do anything, and I'm not the dog catcher anymore. So it's all on Japan. If you need to build something over here that handles this kind of situation, do it. And I personally think that would be totally fine. But from the Chinese perspective, if their neighbors start kind of ratcheting up the defense spending, even if it's for North Korea, that makes the South China Sea stuff a lot more interesting. And meanwhile, Trump can say, I've kind of let off the gas here. I'm not trying to get up next to China or go in here or do anything. I've just let everyone do what they're going to do naturally, which is defend themselves.
Well, it's a pleasant fantasy, but I don't see it playing out that way. And unfortunately, the people who are urging an invasion or an attack on North Korea, again, they are not thinking long-term consequences. It's just like the people who got us into Vietnam. They weren't thinking it could stretch out that long, cost that many American lives, and result in a military defeat. Everybody who starts a war is convinced they're going to be the ones who win it. But if you look at the Korean War, the history of the Korean War when it started, it did not go well. And even Mattis is saying we really don't want to get into a ground war in North Korea. It's going to be an absolute disaster, which is why now they're talking about precision surgical strikes on the nuclear weapons. But the gamble there is, by now, Kim Jong-un has moved them. And you can't guarantee 100% that you're going to get all those nuclear weapons. And once you attack North Korea, then Kim Jong-un is going to be tempted to use those nuclear weapons. Maybe he can't reach the United States, but he can reach a U.S. ally, or he could sail it on down to Guam. It's very destabilizing. And the main reason we seem to be going into North Korea are the $1 trillion in rare earth elements and all that opium. Same reason we went into Afghanistan. The CIA drug lords need a new source of opium, and they don't want competition.
The sad irony, Mike, is that there is so much potential there. If you look at South Korea,
yes,
you consider it's basically the same group of people. And they've done a lot of research on liberal democracies and the places in the world it can take hold, take root, and work. And one thing is you need, I think it's either 95 or 100 IQ average population. Well, the Koreans they have very high IQs.
So they're very, very, very smart people. But, looking at what's going on in this country, I'm not sure liberal democracy is the best of all possible systems. If you look at how the liberal Democrats have been behaving ever since the conservatives won. Anyway, listen, we got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We got all kinds of callers on the phone lines, and we'll be back to take those calls. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We got a lot of callers waiting on the line, and I'm going to ask some of you to be patient. We will get to you here. We're going to start with Sherry in Texas. Aloha, Sherry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Yeah, I've had another awakening to the corruption that we're dealing with here. Is the phone service provider. I was talking to a friend. He said, "Gee, my local calling isn't that expensive." They're working like banks, like Wells Fargo. They added on all these extras when the people didn't ask for them.
Yes.
Well, this is a Verizon subsidiary that took over landlines recently, and they carried over charges. I was paying $25 a month, and this has been going on for more than a year, for ancillary charges that I never asked for, evidently, and it was carried over, like I said. You have a thing called an access charge, and I didn't realize that the access charge included things like Lifeline. I can get up off the floor, I can still do petty tours around the room, and maintenance charge. I guess my lines run underground, so I don't think lightning's going to get them. Identity theft. I don't even think I have a FICO score anymore since I've been over 11 years since I've ever used any debt. So it's and they called it an access charge. Well, I think the problem is when you're talking on the phone, it's not legally binding, so you really have to put these things, I think, in writing. I asked for no extras, and that's a flat rate charge. Well, no one explained to me the difference, when you're talking, they're saying, well, you do want access to this line. Mm-hmm. Their argument is that if you want to be safe, don't you, and have these extra things. And
that's their job, is to get you to agree to go along with it. Now, for the Lifeline one, real quick, it's not because you can get off the floor. It's basically charged to everybody to provide these additional services for those who qualify, as handicapped, to give it to them. But if you ever look at your cell phone bill and wonder why it is so complicated, it is to hide from you the fact that, there's a lot of stuff on there that you're being charged for over and above the flat fee. One of the cell phone companies now, I forget which one it is, but it's one of the new startups is out there saying the price we're showing you on the TV is the price you will pay. Everything is already included into it. There are no extras when you come on in and sign up. Anyway, Sherry, I appreciate the bind that you're in. You might want to look at a consumer advocate somewhere near where you live that's going to help you sort this mess out because, companies are going to do whatever they can to maximize the amount of money they get from you, and that includes giving you all kinds of services that you didn't sign up for. Some are actually, unfortunately, mandated by the government, and you can't get out from those things as well.
They brought down the fee to 19.
Okay,
from 44 to 19, and I wrote to them. I'm going to write to the commissioner or something, say my right to express. I have the right to express. I said, you have made us less safe and exploited us, but we have the right to express our grievances, and I have no desire to misuse free speech. So I want to say that's the value of this show. I don't care if I lose $400. I have now expressed my grievances, and I'm going to write to them, let them know that we know. Yes. What they're doing, and we don't appreciate the lack of explanation, and we're going to exercise our free right and use it responsibly, which I hope they will learn to do, So it's come down to 19, and I don't care if they're going to give me, I think, $13 to make me happy, but I'm not going to raise a fuss because they'll just exploit me and say I'm a difficult customer. They'll always use it,
Yeah, you're right.
So
well,
I'm in good shape.
It's a happy outcome. Okay, Sherry, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Glenn in Philadelphia. Aloha, Glenn. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. I hear you talking about the wage issue, and I appreciate the importance of money circulating in the economy. You always talk about how the Treasury can issue the money, spend it into circulation, tax it back, put it back into circulation again. This always reminds me of the Broadway show Hello, Dolly, and in the movie Walter Matthau and Barbara Streisand starred, and Walter Matthau played a character named Horace Vandergelder, who was a wealthy entrepreneur. And someone, asked him about his philosophy, his success. He said, "Well, I always figure money's like manure. It's not much use unless you spread it around."
Yeah.
And that's a classic thing. However, when it comes to minimum wages, it's sort of like an unfunded socialist, mandate. And when it's imposed on entrepreneurs, we know it drives small businesses out of business, and it tempts big businesses like fast food to automate. So while the money needs to be circulated, I'm not sure taking it out of the hide of existing entrepreneurs is the best way to do it.
Well,
perhaps reappropriate.
We need to turn this process around, because certainly before we got into this money junkie phase of skyrocketing prices and skyrocketing taxes and high-paying jobs disappearing, entrepreneurs did very well. If they had a good product and a good service, they would prosper and they would pay their employees probably even more than the minimum wage. I mean, I worked for a lot of entrepreneurial outfits when I was younger. I never once was offered minimum wage. They were paying for the talent that they were hiring. So I don't think that that's as much of a factor. But again, your employees collectively are also your customers collectively, and if you're not allowing them an environment where they can trade their labor for decent wages and salaries, then they're not coming in the front door of your place of business to do business with you. And that is just a cold, hard fact. And the money is all concentrated way up at the very top, and there aren't enough money junkies to go around to all the shopping malls and buy up all the consumer goods, to go to all the car lots and buy all the new cars. There's only a few of them. They only need a few cars and a few clothes and a few high-def TVs. So the retail economy, the consumer economy, is breaking down right now. And prior to the 2008 mortgage-backed security fraud meltdown, the consumer spending accounted for 60% of the entire United States economy. You can't carve that big a chunk of economic activity out of the economy and expect it to survive.
Well, right. And when the fellow called in about the what top executives are paid in various countries, and even though it's the case that the top execs make less money in those other countries are still also in an economic problem. So even spreading the money around a little better, from
those other countries are in trouble for the same reason we're in trouble. They're enslaved to a private central bank system that exists to serve itself, and which by design creates more debt than money with which to pay the debt, to make everybody a debt slave. And
I totally agree.
Okay.
I totally agree. And that's why taking it out of the hide of entrepreneurs isn't going to work. And also, there's a lot more people on the planet. When I was born, there were 3 billion people on the planet. And that's a lot of cheap labor. And so it's a lot of challenges. All right, thank you, Mike.
All right, we're going to let you go. Switch over to Rick in Arizona. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, yeah, just a couple of callers ago, that lady was talking about getting ripped off by her internet company. Minnesota Attorney General is suing CenturyLink for exactly what she was talking about. Now, I want to talk about possible wars. The United States is a paper tiger. They're in no business of talking or giving lip to anybody. Putin, I don't know how long ago it was, but he said he can destroy the United States Navy in 2 weeks, and he is right. The old MiG-29 can operate at 60,000 feet. It's got 140,000 horsepower. It can target and pick off our Navy in a zone where our F-16s can't even get to.
Yes.
And that's not counting their new jets. I mean, so look, if you're going to go over to the South China Sea and start lobbing rocks at the Chinese and you kill a few of them, they can nationalize companies over there that belong to us. We're in no business of starting wars. It's all talk. I don't know. It has its root. They have their reasons. But we can't start a war with anybody. They're going to kick our ass. As simple as that.
Yeah, but again, the people who want these wars are caught up in their dreams of greatness and ideology. They're convinced that we'll win because America's never lost a war, if you ignore the fact that we lost Vietnam, and if you ignore the fact that we never actually won the Korean War, and if you ignore the fact that we didn't exactly win World War I and World War II all by ourselves, despite what you see on film and TV shows. But again, they're feeling they have no choice. If they don't conquer the world and drag it back to Bretton Woods, it is only a matter of time before the U.S. economy and the federal government collapse.
The Fortune 500 won't let them do it. It won't happen. If Trump is really like he wants to start a war, he'll be gone. They're not going to do it. They will not let him start and disrupt the whole system. Nobody has that much to gain by starting a war, except for a few people in the banks. That ain't going to happen. That's going to be stopped in its tracks.
Let me ask you a question. How many of those companies in the Fortune 500 have military contractor divisions?
Not enough. Not enough.
I hope you're right.
There's not enough.
I hope you're right.
I mean, I know what you're saying, Mike, but when it comes down to actually start throwing the rocks and causing trouble and getting other countries, people that are on the ground near our factories, controlling, our businesses, they're not going to go for it. There's too much to lose. Look at Foxconn. 300,000 people on the campus just making Apple products. That's just Apple. They can shut it down. They don't even have to fire a shot at us. They can just call a work slowdown, and everybody with their smartphone is going to be pissed. So getting into a war is just propaganda in my mind. I think they do it for their reasons. It has their reasons. Maybe it's to fill up airtime on the internet or whatever. But Trump's not going to start a war with anybody, in my opinion.
Well, I don't think Trump wants to start a war, but it may be started for him. That's the area where we're in a lot of danger. I mean, you've got people like John McCain are out there just screaming a bloody murder for war, and they might just haul off and do something to get the war going, stage a false flag. Right now, our government is badly factionalized. You've got all these different intelligence agencies that have gone rogue, and they're operating asynchronously, independently. And they've all got their own agenda, and a lot of them see this idea of a new world war as making their own particular situation a lot better. And for everybody else who gets hurt or driven out of business, well, that's just too bad. That's the cost of doing business.
I don't think you're even going to be able to get away with a surgical strike in North Korea. China won't stand for it. They're not going to let us start bombing North Korea for any reason whatsoever without a huge backlash. So that's my opinion.
Well, I hope you're right. I hope you're right. I absolutely do. All right, we're going to switch over to Alex in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. I just want to say this one thing in response to that last conversation. The book War is a Racket shows how industry's profits quadruple.
Yeah, that's a good reference. That's a good reference.
And I mean, all the industries and businesses actually make so much money, they want war. I hate to say that. But I was calling to tell you that I'm concerned about Trump's life. I think that the globalists are running out of options in Russia crap to impeach him, even though they submitted an article of impeachment today. Did you hear that?
Oh, yeah, we reported on that here, and it's not going to go anywhere because the House would have to have a majority vote, and the Republicans, they've got 24 more Republicans than Democrats in the House of Representatives. It's not going to go anywhere. It was filed just so the media can say, oh, there's an article of impeachment against Donald Trump. And absolutely, if they're planning on an assassination attempt against him, they're going to want to demonize him first so that people won't feel that sympathetic to him when he goes. That was a big part of what Lee Oswald was doing with Guy Bannister in New Orleans before the assassination, where they were passing out all these flyers that John F. Kennedy was soft on communism, and they were just trying to demonize him in the eyes of the general public so that when Kennedy finally was killed, there wouldn't be as much sympathy. That part didn't work. The nation was very shocked and upset over the assassination of the president.
That's right. Well, I think that the people that actually do the real polls, which I actually think the Democrats and globalists actually do real polls, I think that they know, according to those real polls, that Trump's a little more popular than what everyone's letting on that he is. He's much more popular. And I'm just afraid for his life right now because they're running out of options. And I think that the crimes that he's trying to uncover are more than we realize.
Well, there's too much that we do not know, but I agree with you that the end game of this attempt to get Trump out of the White House could very well be an assassination attempt. And I'm glad he's got his own private security, working with the Secret Service Protective Detail, because lately the Secret Service Protective Detail, they haven't been all that good. And frankly, when they were checking Claire and I out when Obama was here for Christmas one year, I wasn't impressed by them. So, yeah, I hope Trump has his Kevlar undies on and he's being really, really careful, because presidents do get killed when they get in the way of corporate profits.
Yeah, that's right. And did you hear where Jonathan Turley basically said that what Donald Trump Jr. did, like meeting the Russian lawyer, basically he didn't break the law?
No, he didn't break the law. It was just a meeting, and what was discussed was a client's interest in the laws of the United States. And by the way, it's just now come on out that lawyer, the one whose Moscow office appears to just be a shell with no phone, no email, no website. Apparently, there's a photo that she put out on Facebook from inside John McCain's office. So now, if it's a big deal for Donald Trump Jr. to have met this Russian lawyer, why aren't they going to make a stink about John McCain meeting this lawyer?
Yeah, it's the corruption is neck deep. I mean, it's unbelievable right now. It's unbelievable. And it's pathetic that the globalists, there's a lot of Democrats, I don't think that they intentionally mean to be what they are, but they need to really take a good look at their position, because I think it's a very evil position to try to discredit the rightly elected president of the United States. Well, it's a shame.
Unfortunately, most of the Democrats are still convinced that Russia stole the presidency from Hillary Clinton. They are absolutely ignoring the mounting evidence that it was, in fact, Hillary Clinton who was trying to steal the election all along. They're caught up in their beliefs, and because Hillary ran her campaign as a personality cult, these people will never admit error, because then they'd have to admit they themselves were wrong to have supported Hillary in the first place. Alex, we're going to let you go, take a break for commercials. Back with, we've got one more caller waiting, and we'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the phones. Boy, a lot of callers here today. Lenny in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. Thank you for being so patient. What's on your mind today?
Thank you. Hey, listen, in reference to your last caller and a couple of callers ago, I just want to ask a few I want to say something real quick in regards to Trump. If they choose to assassinate him, it at best be a soft assassination in the form of poisoning or something like that, or something they get a heart attack like they did to the Russian ambassador to the UN. But if they do a hard assassination like they did to JFK, I think they're going to get more than what they bargained for.
I would agree with you on that one.
Okay, and I think they're going to deserve it. Okay, that's the one thing. Now, I want to go back to North Korea and the caller that called in a few callers ago. And I know you know the answer to these questions, but I'm trying to make a point here. Who lied about weapons of mass destruction and invaded Iraq?
The United States.
Who said that Gaddafi was using Viagra to rape his own women and invaded him?
I've forgotten about that one. The United States.
Okay. Who said that Assad was using sarin gas on his own people?
The United States.
Okay. Now, somebody's telling you that Kim Jong-un is crazy, and you're crazy enough to believe them. Now I ask you, who's crazy?
You make a very good point there. And you know what's interesting is, again, going back to my childhood, during the first Cold War, that we were being propagandized in our schools, and we were being told that the Russian people were all evil, and the Russian leaders were completely crazy, and they were insane. Exactly the same thing we're being told today about Kim Jong-un. Do you remember back when they were trying to get that coup d'etat going in Iran back in 2009, and they were out there with this claim that Ahmadinejad had said, "We will wipe Israel off the face of the earth," and then it turned out it was a completely made-up mistranslation. He hadn't even said that. But that's what we all need to understand. We need to make that breakthrough of just simply knowing that the corporate media and the government are lying to us to control what we're thinking, to get us to go along with the war. And the good news is it doesn't seem to be having much success right now. And that may be another reason they're in a total panic here.
Exactly. I agree with you 100%. And I just want to say to the people who are listening, don't be so easy to have yourself programmed. Okay, I once heard Joe Solenke say his father got on him. He repeated something he once heard, and his father went off on him and said, do you think for yourself, or are you a papagawa? In other words, a parent who just repeats everything that you hear.
Yep.
Okay, and the point being is that at least the parent knows it has a bird brain. Okay, but the thing is, the human who's supposed to be able to reason and to be able to figure things out, and to all the Bible bashers, they're saying that. Can you hold me over?
Yeah, I'm going to hold you over the station break. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we are talking with Lenny in Los Angeles. And Lenny, before you start, I just want to make a comment here. One of the big lies that is put out by the corporate media is that they are informing, that you are informed while they don't inform you. They want you to think you're educated even though they're not educating you. And they themselves are the biggest reinforcer of the idea that if you walk around repeating what they told you, that you will be seen by your peers as well-informed on current events. And no, you're just being drafted to be part of the propaganda machine.
I agree with you 100%. And just to finish up what I was saying, to all you Bible believers, and we all believe in something to a degree. I'm going to throw a little science in here, and you being a man of science, I think you can follow where I'm going. The Bible says, ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. My question to all the believers, free of what? Okay, is it free from if matter can neither be destroyed nor created, it only changes form. Does it not matter if we get into a nuclear war, what level of consciousness you wake up on the other side? If you go into the next world, believing in a lie, and hating people you know nothing about, because I never met Kim Jong-un. I never met the man, so I can't say I hate him. Okay? Mm-hmm. But I have met a lot of people here in L.A. I can say that about. Okay? But
Same here, especially Hollywood.
And especially in Hollywood. Someone asked me, I was having a conversation with someone in Hollywood not too long ago, and they asked me to say, they said, well, I'm an atheist. I don't particularly believe in God. I said, I do, even more so than now I've been living here in Hollywood. So I can see a difference. But I do agree with you. There are a few good people. Okay, who are not caught up. They really are artists and who are trying to use a voice to make a difference. But everything else is about money, power, and all the sex you can get.
Yes, it absolutely is. Lenny, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go and take a call from Linda in Massachusetts. Aloha, Linda. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Well, when you mentioned, it's been on my mind, the Trump Jr. emails, and when you mentioned something about John McCain, this lawyer being pictured with John McCain, the newest thing that's popping out right now is that he also was pictured with Obama administration.
Yes, that one came out yesterday.
Meeting.
Yeah. Now, to be accurate, John McCain is not standing with her in this selfie. She just took a selfie of herself, but she's in John McCain's office at that time. So we need to keep these things accurate. But again, lawyers are saying Donald Jr. Did not break any laws. It was a perfectly appropriate meeting for him to be in. The real issue, though, is that the corporate media tried to claim that Donald Trump Jr. was warned ahead of the meeting with this lawyer that this was an attempt by Russia to interfere with the election. And Donald Trump just released the entire email chain, and it just isn't in there. But we know the motto of the U.S. government and the corporate media: if at first you don't succeed, lie, lie again.
Michael, I didn't know about the John McCain office selfie or this other administrative thing until I listened to your program today and just saw that on Facebook. But it had been driving me crazy that the language in the email. I think the whole thing is a setup. It was a setup in the beginning.
I think so too.
I mean, this is just so it's my educated guess or my conspiracy theory. Her response. Her recorded media response to the question, what do you think happened that the group you were meeting with and yourself had such completely different ideas of what this meeting was going to be about? Her response was, because they wanted it to be so badly about getting information, about Hillary. It was just such a pat, scripted response. I mean, a normal response would have been, I have no clue how that happened. But that's not what she did. That's not what she said. She tried to implicate the Trump administration, in Russia.
Yeah, she's some kind of an operative. It's come on out that her office in Moscow is just a shell. There are a lot of people in Russia that supposedly she was doing business with are now saying they've never even heard of her. So she's fake from top to bottom. And yeah, it was a setup. Again, going back to Donald Trump Jr. released the email chain. Basically, this lawyer contacted I forget the intermediary there, and said, we have information on Hillary. She used that to bait him on in. And at this point, it's looking like that the Hillary people or the deep state were trying to manufacture contacts between Trump and his campaign and his family and anybody from Russia that they could, so that they could come on out and say, yeah. And at the same...
They had to pull this out, Michael, when they came to where they came, which is... dirt. They've hit nothing. They've got nothing, and this was set up to have something. It's just disgusting. The language of the email itself. It would be like if I was selling drugs or if I was doing something that I don't want public, and I was to include in my email about 3 times, and these are illegal. I mean, that's the way the email itself runs, and I think the friend should be looked at who his connections are too. The friend from the pageant, who is he connected with politically that he would have got himself involved in this? And that's all I have to say, Mike. I love your show.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We're going to let you go here and do a quick shout out to our on-air affiliates just rejoining the network. Yeah, the more that comes on out about this Russian lawyer, the more it feels like she's a front of some kind. And that basically the Hillary people or the Democrats or the anti-Trumpers, whoever, were desperate to try and manufacture any connections between anybody from Russia and anybody from the Trump campaign, just so the corporate media can say, oh, Donald Trump Jr. met with this Russian lawyer. It's horrible. It's terrible. Show me what law was broken. And meanwhile, of course, everybody is still trying to turn a blind eye to the Uranium One deal. And all these other instances. I mean, John McCain was talking with the Russians. Why are they not making a big deal about that? Oh, and by the way, the latest propaganda coming on out is more and more people are out there saying prosecute Hillary for the email scandal, for possible espionage. The new talking point coming out of the Hillary camp is, well, she didn't win the presidency, so she's just a private citizen now, so it doesn't matter what she had done. Well, I have a news flash for you. Title 18 does not make an exception for private citizens. If you have released classified information to people who are not allowed to have it, then you are still going to jail. But if they're trying that whole idea about, oh, leave her alone because she's a private citizen, then they are definitely scraping the bottom of the barrel for any kind of propaganda to protect their little golden girl. Actually, she's kind of gray, but you get what I'm saying here. All right, getting on back to the economic news and speaking about gold, and yet another article pointing out that here in the United States, more and more seniors are not going to be able to retire. We have more seniors still working than at any time since the 1960s. This idea that you would work and that Social Security would help you provide for a retirement, it's not there. Social Security is broke. It was looted. It was plundered during the Bill Clinton administration. They took that cash buildup for the baby boomers, of which I am one, and they spent it as general revenue. That's where Bill Clinton got his magic federal budget surplus. He embezzled the money of the American workers who had entrusted it to the Social Security Trust Fund. That's not the government's money. It's the American people's money. And he just took it. And he called it a loan, and they put these special treasury bonds back in Social Security, but they can't redeem them. Technically, the United States government is in a state of default, but they have strategically defaulted against the American worker because the American workers cannot lower the United States government's credit rating or institute any kind of legal proceedings. But that's where we are on that. Down in Venezuela, things are getting really out of hand. There was a video showing a gang of bikers chase down a truck and attack it with a Molotov cocktail to steal its cargo of sugar. All righty. GOP Representative Gomert on Obamacare says this Orwellian oligarchy has got to stop before August. And he's absolutely right about that. The problem is there's a lot of money. Even though it was an abject failure in both of its overt and covert purposes, there's still a lot of money flowing around inside Obamacare. And the new replacement for it is just more of the same. All that changes is who's the beneficiary of that outpouring of cash. They should just repeal it and let the free market decide. Anytime that you make something like insurance mandatory, prices go up, service goes down. We saw that when auto insurance became mandatory. Now, getting on over to Europe, as you know, there were reports that a British study had pointed to Saudi Arabia as the top funder of Islamist extremism in Great Britain. And the Home Secretary is now insisting this report has to be kept secret. She's being accused of putting the so-called friendship with Saudi Arabia above the safety of the British people. And yeah, we see that in all of these government actions, open borders, whatever. The safety of the people doesn't matter. We have an agenda to fulfill. We have a policy to follow. Now, there's a private group that has put itself together. It's called Defend Europe. And apparently they have raised enough money to acquire a 40-meter long ship called the Sea Star, or actually they chartered it. And what they're doing is they're going on out into the Mediterranean. They're rescuing illegals who are coming from Libya in these human traffickers' boats, and then they're taking them back to Libya, which I think is a good idea. Now, things are getting a little fractious up there in Europe. Norway is very angry with the European Union for sending their fishing ships into Oslo waters, crab fishing vessels, so forth and so on. See, here's the problem. Norway is not part of the EU. And so Norway's territorial waters and their fishing grounds are not subject to Brussels' jurisdiction, and yet Brussels simply said, yeah, your ships can go up into Norway. So, another article coming out of Investment Watch blog, documents have surfaced, once again showing that George Soros is financing the European Muslim Brotherhood groups. I think George Soros is a perfect example of why individuals should not be allowed to rise above a certain level of wealth, because then they start seeing themselves as gods, and they treat our planet and its population as their personal playthings. Bill Gates is another one. And these people are not elected to represent the will of the people. They're just out there with their money saying, I have the money, I can do what I want. Here, more vaccines for you. Here, refugees into your country. Now, as you know, there's been an alarming bias in the European courts in favor of the migrants and refugees. They're being let go on serious crimes under the claim that, well, these things aren't really illegal in their homes, so therefore we should be kind to them there. Absolutely not. When you go to another country, you learn what their laws are. How many of you have heard the expression, ignorance of the law is no excuse? That should apply here. Well, there's this article that came on out of Russia today talking about the newest wrinkle, and this article was written by a lawyer themselves saying, I don't believe this actually happened, where a judge has thrown a case out of court against a migrant who was beating up a woman on a regular basis, and she was pregnant at the time. And they let this guy go saying that he's suffering from cultural incompetence. He doesn't understand how the court system works. Therefore, there's no point in putting him on trial. Well, throw him in jail. And again, you go back to Teddy Roosevelt. His message to immigrants coming to the United States of America, if you want to come here, welcome. Come in through the legal process, and once you are here, understand you are now living in the United States of America. We have one set of laws, ours. We have one language, English. And you are welcome to be here and contribute to our society, but understand you have to adapt to us, not the other way around. House Republicans have unveiled a bill to build the U.S.-Mexico border wall. It is a political victory for Donald Trump. But again, I'm not really sure a wall is even really necessary. I think if we just started enforcing the Title VIII laws and went after people who were aiding and abetting the illegal immigrants, giving them aid, giving them jobs, if we cut off the financial incentive for the illegals to come here, they wouldn't come here. And we're already seeing a huge decline in the number of illegals trying to come across the border. Excuse me, I have a little bit of a cold today. Now, here's another example of political correctness gone completely, totally overboard. Up in San Francisco, on the Bay Area Rapid Transit, they have had a recent rash of gang train robberies in which groups of young people, in one case 60 people, boarded a train and simply ran down the cars, robbing everybody, and then fled. And it was all caught on the security cameras. And the BART is refusing to release the video to, quote, avoid racist stereotyping of suspects, end quote. Not realizing they just told us who they were. But that's it. You know, we've got this video of all these criminals doing what they're doing, but we're going to keep the video secret because we don't want to reinforce any racial stereotypes. It's not the video that's reinforcing the racial stereotypes. It's the behavior. Now, I don't know who is doing this, but we're going to put the warning out anyway. And the original article, as it came out of Investment Watch Blog, was specific to Walmart, but it could be anywhere. For some reason at this one store, somebody decided to booby-trap the shopping carts by gluing the edges of razor blades on the bottom half of the handle so that when people would grab it, they would cut themselves. And I don't know if this is just somebody's idea of a sick joke, or if these were put out there to discourage the homeless from stealing the shopping carts. But when just common sense, just take a look at that handle before you grab it. because apparently the blades were wide enough where some people had to go to the hospital. And it is a big problem with the homeless stealing the shopping carts. We go to a Safeway down here, and they just went through a renovation, upgrade. Place looks really nice now, and they got all these brand new shopping carts. And lately we go down there, there are no shopping carts left. You're having to go around and do your heavy shopping with that little basket on your arm. And apparently it's the homeless people are taking those shopping carts. And we do have a huge concentration of homeless people living along the shores of Pearl Harbor, especially that Center Lock area. We have areas of homeless people that have actually become effectively no-go zones. People don't want to go in there. Cops don't even want to go in there, let alone somebody who's being paid minimum wage to go recover the shopping carts. But it is a real problem out there. Now, a little bit of good news on the civil justice front. Connecticut just banned civil forfeiture without a criminal conviction. Connecticut Governor Daniel Malloy finally signed House Bill 7146, which changes the state's civil forfeiture laws. And basically, there has to be a conviction of an actual crime in a court before Connecticut can seize your private property. And that's a good start, because as they currently stand, the civil forfeiture laws are basically a license for police departments to steal. And right now, the police are stealing more than the muggers, burglars, and thieves all put together. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, when I was young, which was admittedly quite a while ago, I lived in a world in which companies would make a good product and offer it for sale, and customers would look at that product, look at the price, and they had the freedom to decide whether or not they were going to buy that. Was it useful? Did they need it? Was it affordable? Go for it. And we have moved so far away from that to a place where corporations have become so powerful that they, using the force of the government, can make bad products, and you are ordered to buy them. You don't have the freedom to refuse. Vaccines being one of the more obvious offenders there. And concern over the public health and public safety is being abandoned. I think it was last week we were reporting on how the FDA is no longer going to require a disclaimer on TV commercials for prescription medication. You've seen them today. They'll say, oh, it's a wonderful medicine. It will do this. You'll be hip. You'll be cool. And then there's that voice at the end that says, if you take this medication, your nose could fall off. You could get depressed. You could kill yourself. You could die from this stuff. And now the FDA is saying, people just aren't paying attention to those things, so we're going to take those off. No, what they're doing is they're pandering to these pharmaceutical corporations one more time to not fully inform potential customers of what this medication can or cannot do or might do in negative circumstances. So over at Global Research in California, they have an article, Why Are Public Officials Protecting GMO and the Pesticides Industry? And they're talking about this incredible cesspool of corruption coming out of the agrochemicals, agritech industry, and its lobbyists and its pet legislators who are out there saying, we're here to make money and we don't care what the GMO is doing. They're still out there trying to get California to remove GMO, the cancer label from GMO products. You're cutting into our profits. We don't care if it causes cancer. We've got to make profits with this stuff. And it is. It's all corrupt. It is all insanely corrupt. And we've reached a stage where a great many states are now mandating the use of pesticides on your property and on your farms. There was a big stink a couple of weeks back where there was this certified organic farm that was being ordered by the state government to start using an artificial pesticide, which would have resulted in this organic farm no longer being able to say it was organic. And because that was its business, it was essentially going to put it out of business. But who cares about organic farmers? We're here to sell pesticides. We're here to sell glyphosate and GMO and all the rest of that stuff. And you're not allowed to say no anymore. It's like back on the 4th, I said, reread that Declaration of Independence. The list of reasons given for why the colonies broke away from Great Britain, because we're back in a lot of those same circumstances all over again. We're not a democracy anymore. We're not even a republic. We're not even a capitalist nation anymore. We are a full-blown fascist economic dictatorship. It's all about the money. Your money going out of your pockets into their pockets by any means available. And that's exactly what it is. Now, the good news is no fascist regime has ever survived for all that long. And the interesting thing is Vladimir Lenin actually predicted that when Western capitalism failed, it would deteriorate into fascism to protect the wealth and power of the elites, and that is exactly what has happened. So old Lenin called it correct on that one. We're absolutely there. We're absolutely there. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we're going to take a phone call from Leslie in Idaho. Leslie, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, you were just talking about the drug companies taking off the warnings on television, and I never understood when they started putting up those ads, because it's been like how many decades that cigarettes and liquor can't even advertise.
Well, you're absolutely right here, and the United States is one of only 3 countries that allows the TV advertising of prescription medication. Unfortunately, nobody wants to change that because that is a big chunk of the operating revenue of the corporate media right now.
I would think it would be in the same category.
I would agree. I mean, alcohol advertising is still allowed on American TV, but cigarettes are definitely banned.
I thought they did beer, but they can't show the label or something, but they can't do hard liquor, right?
No, I see ads for vodka all the time.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
All right, we're going to let you go here. Okay, getting on back here. Now, we all remember Fukushima, and we all remember Operation Tomodachi, which was when the United States dispatched an entire aircraft carrier group centered on the Ronald Reagan, a total of 25 ships, to provide search and rescue and medical aid in the aftermath of the quake and tsunami and the meltdown of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. Thousands of American military personnel assisted the Japanese people in need. Unfortunately, despite assurances to the contrary, the military people were exposed to serious amounts of radiation. And I understand the Ronald Reagan, they're still using it, but they've never been able to really clean it on up, which means people who are serving on it even today are going to get these problems. And the military personnel who took part in the Fukushima operation were getting symptoms like rectal bleeding, thyroid problems, tumors, and within 3 years of the disaster, sailors started coming down with leukemia, testicular, and brain cancers. Now, here is where it gets kind of ugly. The U.S. government has basically turned their back on most of these people, just like they did to the survivors of that nuclear test in Nevada, just like they did to the victims of Gulf War syndrome. Well, you know, it's military. Bad things happen. And so now all of these U.S. personnel who have come down with these illnesses, they're approaching the government of Japan and saying, we got these illnesses trying to help you out. What can you do for us? And we don't know what Japan is or is not going to do for them. And again, on 9/11, those first responders, they went on down there, and the head of the Environmental Protection Agency said the air is safe for you to breathe. No, it was not. It was filled with tons of asbestos dust. And those first responders today, those still alive, are dealing with serious illnesses. You are all disposable to the government. You're just bits and pieces to be put into play, and when you're all used up, thrown in the trash. That's how they see you. Every time we have an incident like this, illustrates that point. The government has no respect for you as a human being. You're an asset. You're property. We're going to use you up, and when there's nothing more for you to give, we're going to throw you away. Now, there's an alarming story coming out of any news that the radiation detected at Fukushima is approaching a record high. Many locations are registering the highest levels ever measured. There are radioactive materials in the groundwater seeping toward the ocean. They can't get it under control. And the fact that the radiation levels are going up tells us there is uncontrolled, spontaneous nuclear fission taking place deep underground. It's absolutely a disaster. They can't do anything about it. That's why they're not going to talk about it. When was the last time you heard anything about Fukushima on the corporate media? It's been a while, I think. Story coming out of Before It's News. Fukushima leak is the biggest threat to humanity and Earth. Fukushima rainwater is the cause of over 1 million deaths in the U.S., Canada, and UK. Now, that's obviously an estimate because they can't track the raindrops. But again, if you're contaminated with specific isotopes, those can be identified and traced back to specific reactors, even specific part in a reactor. And you need to understand that some of these isotopes last a very, very long time. Over in Chernobyl, that happened 30 years ago. And so far, only 50% of the cesium-137 has decayed. We're going to be living with that for many more years, and the same is true of Fukushima. Same is true of Hanford. And it illustrates that governments and corporations will undertake projects and not really think about the long-term consequences. Hanford began as part of the U.S. nuclear weapons development program. Oh, we need the bomb to scare off the Soviet Union, and we'll worry about this glow-in-the-dark stuff later on, somewhere down the road. And it's always pushed off, and now we have Hanford is the most contaminated site on Earth with radioactivity, and now those little tunnels that they built to store radioactively contaminated rail cars and truck trailers, they're starting to collapse. It has just been mismanaged like you would not believe. Now, we have been talking about Michael Mann and his recent problems in the courts in Canada. And it turns out it's part of a larger story because Michael Mann has come under repeated attack for his claim that there was really no medieval warming period and the hockey stick takeoff of Earth's temperature, which Al Gore seized on as a major part of his Inconvenient Truth movie and probably will repeat in his Inconvenient sequel, which is due out sometime soon, and I don't know when because I don't plan to see it either. And so what Michael Mann has done is everybody who has criticized him and his work and his results, he's now suing them for libel. And a lot of these lawsuits were in Washington, D.C. under liberal judges, and all of the defendants say exactly the same thing. If you want to prove my concerns wrong, show us the raw data from which, and your methodology from which you got this chart. And Michael Mann's argument in the U.S. courts has been, oh, this data is all proprietary to me. It's private. No, it was paid for with public money, first of all. Second of all, it's a temperature record. It shouldn't be proprietary to anybody. And it certainly violates the spirit of reproducibility. So apparently, Michael Mann sued somebody up in Canada, and it went to court there, and he tried the same excuse. The raw data is proprietary, and that's when he ran into trouble. Because the judge said, no, that can't be proprietary. That's the whole core of the argument. Does your raw data and your methodology really yield the result you claim it does? And Michael Mann came on back and said, well, I cite as precedent the decisions down in Washington, D.C., that the data can be kept private. And the Canadian judge said, I don't care what the U.S. courts are saying. If you're suing this man for libel, you have to prove that his criticism of what you did was in error. And the only way that you can prove that is you have to release the raw data and the methodology. How do you get from raw data to hockey stick graph? And, of course, Michael Mann is fighting that tooth and nail because we learned from the ClimateGate leaks from the Hadley Climate Research Unit. They were rigging the computer code to produce the result they wanted, which was a rapidly warming world to be blamed on you icky-poo human beings in order to guilt you out of your money and your obedience. And amazingly enough, they're still out there pushing this nonsense. Now, I don't know if they still think they're going to succeed in getting you to pay a carbon tax or buy carbon credits or agree to a global environmental authority, or everybody who bet their reputations on this hoax is trying to basically not go down in flames, whether it's Michael Mann himself or all these science channels that hopped onto this bandwagon, or everybody else who bought into this nonsense. Oh, and by the way, there's a story right now, the big chunk of ice breaking off Antarctica. See, it proves the world is warming. No, it does no such thing. Large chunks of ice break off those ice shelves all the time, and they've been doing it since the planet first formed and we first got ice and water. But that's the way the corporate media is going to work. Anything that can be construed as supporting their agenda, that's it. Oh, this bird died of heat stroke, proves the world is warming. Now, fortunately, one of the things Donald Trump did do is he appointed a new head of the EPA who does think that all this human-caused global warming stuff is a bunch of nonsense, and now he is saying that he wants proponents of both points of view, the global warming alarmists and the ones who are saying Earth is no more warmer than it was in the medieval warming period, to actually have a debate on climate on TV. And it will be very revealing as to who is willing to show up and who is not. And by the way, every time Al Gore held a little gathering when he was making his tour about his movie and his agenda, there was always a big sign out front, reporters will not be allowed to ask questions. I even have a photo of one of those signs there. All right, we're going to take a phone call from Mark in Western New York. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, regarding Fukushima, I just wanted to mention something, Michael.
Yes?
The Nuclear Emergency Tracking Center, NETC.com, was supposedly private readings from around the globe. I noticed, first off, if you look at the icons that are green,
yes,
you still have to click them because the change in level of severity only happens when the reading is on the rise or is stationary.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's for instance, right around the plant at Daiichi. This was on 7/7 this year.
Mm-hmm.
Their high reading was 2,059. Their current reading at the time was 1,856, and their low reading was 1,737.
Okay, are you talking sieverts?
Now, let me see if I can explain to you what they're classifying it under. Small n is in Nancy, large S is in sieverts.
Okay.
Small v / H, semicolon. I don't know what that is.
Ah, okay. Well, I've seen
right
that
around,
website. I've seen the website. And I know it's supposed to be private, and it's all these people who've got radiation detectors that can interface to a computer and transmit their data on a continuing basis. I'm not sure how well it's being calibrated, and I say that because there is one of their detectors located in Honolulu, just a few miles from where I am. and they're always reading a lot higher than what I get with my 2 radiation meters here. So I'm not convinced that we're getting accurate data out of that website.
Well, there's another one that BP Earthwatch started late winter, and alleged that they were getting possibly skewed readings from the NETC, and they wanted to set up their own. But then again, just like everything else, there's always somebody out there pointing a finger saying he's this or he's that. But I personally, I've watched a lot of his videos on YouTube, and frankly, I haven't found anything yet that would steer me away. So just because it's a green doesn't mean that there isn't an issue. You have to click on the green symbol in order to see what the low, high, and current level is.
Yes.
Took me a long time to figure that one out. Thank you, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. I'm familiar with the website in question. In fact, I was on there just earlier today because of all this talk about Fukushima. And I have gone back to regularly using my radiation meters here because we are starting to see a slight, and I emphasize slight, elevation in radioactivity here. And so, it's swirling around the Pacific. And again, my detectors will not detect alpha waves, and I do not have the equipment to check for contamination inside food or inside the ocean water. But supposedly, the detector in Honolulu is just an airborne detector, and it's measuring in gamma rays, but it's getting a much higher count than I am. And I looked at the area of the sensor on the map, and I don't see anything nearby that could be contributing to an erroneous reading. So I don't know. It could be that the different meters have different sensitivities. It's kind of a real gray area. And but I'm not convinced that that particular website is 100% accurate. And you need to also keep in mind that there's been a lot of effort put into propagandizing that Fukushima is no big deal. Remember when it first happened and there was this huge explosion and they said, oh, it was a steam explosion, nothing to worry about. Well, steam explosion, or rather hydrogen explosions, produce steam, water vapor, which is white, and the cloud over the reactor was this sickly yellow-green, which just happens to be the color of the quadrivalent form of plutonium oxide. And again, we're lied to all the time about everything. They came out with a huge number of radiation at Fukushima, and 24 hours later they came out and said, oh, the scientists made a mistake with the calculator. It's nowhere near that serious, nothing to worry about. And again, it's rather hard to live in a world where you cannot trust the media to tell you what's really going on. They're only going to tell you what they think is going to hold you in your place, keep you going to work, keep you paying your bills, keep you being useful to the system. That's their job, to control what you think. And we have that from Zika Brzezinski over at MSNBC. All right, we're coming up here on our last commercial break here. Google is still reeling from the fact that they were fined $2.7 billion for one of their search engine manipulations. And according to research psychologist Robert Epstein, this is just the beginning because Google is a company that has made its money by tracking and manipulating people and data on a massive scale. So we may be hearing about more from Google. They're not the wonderful, swell place that was depicted in that movie, which is a shame because I love the movie. We'll be back with the last segment of our show after these few words. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. And apparently millions of Verizon customers' records have been exposed in what they're calling a security lapse, which may be the new polite euphemism for a hacker attack. But apparently customer records for at least 14 million subscribers, including their phone numbers and account PINs, were exposed. So if you are a Verizon customer, you might want to log on in and change your PIN number. There's a new ransomware out. This one is only affecting Chrome so far. And basically what it is when you are attacked, this ransomware threatens to share your entire web browsing history from Chrome with your friends and family if you don't pay up. And apparently this is actually in the Google Play Store. And it's been named Leaker Locker. And basically it says, if you pay, and it's about $50, they will dump your Chrome web history, Facebook messages, SMS text history to every person in your phone and email contacts, including all those web pages that you go to in the privacy of your own room late at night. There is even though we're heading into a new solar minimum, a grand minimum, there is, in fact, a large sunspot on the sun right now. It's 75,000 miles wide. If you have the appropriate glass and filter to look through at the sun, it is actually large enough to be seen with the naked eye, no magnification. But again, do not look directly at the sun without the appropriate welding glass or so forth. And astronomers are very concerned that we may see a major solar event emit from this sunspot that could knock out communication satellites, cause blackouts on Earth, and obviously for shortwave listeners, the ionosphere is going to be really messed up for a very, very long time. Now, here is something that is a little bit scary for those of you who have a swimming pool. It's apparently researchers over at Lomonosov Moscow State University have discovered the world's most popular active sunscreen ingredient, avobenzone, breaks down into very dangerous carcinogenic chemicals while swimming in chlorinated water under sunlight. And apparently, two of the chemicals it produces, phenols and acetylbenzenes, are highly toxic. And the reaction takes place on your wet skin when the sunscreen reacts to UV radiation and the chlorinated water. In swimming pools that use copper salts to make the water look blue, the reaction is actually even worse. The sunscreen can break down into bromoform, a substance that's been linked to nervous system disorders, liver problems, and kidney problems. And in addition to sunscreen, avobenzone is used in moisturizers, creams, and lipsticks that offer SPF solar protection. Right now, there is a cancer epidemic in our all over the world. Cancer is now more common than getting married or having a first baby. This is an analysis from the Macmillan Cancer Support Group showing there were 361... the article's on whatreallyhappened.com. You can look at it there. There's the music. It's the end of our show. We'll be back tomorrow on Thursday here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Please stay tuned for John Stadtmiller's program. Take what you learn here, share it with everybody that you know. We need to push back against that fake news. They're still out there trying to bring down the legally elected President of the United States of America. We cannot let them do that. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.